Here's the truth. You cannot live a Christ-like life on a chronically tired nervous system. It's why I believe that our nervous system is the ultimate factor in making sure that we are healthy or not. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Onyx Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer. If it's your first time here, I just got to welcome you. Again, I'm so excited for the journey that you're about to go on. And I know that people come in from a whole bunch of different avenues. Maybe they've seen me on a stage. Maybe they've just had a podcast passed to them through a friend. Maybe you saw it on social media and were just like, hey, you know what? Let me give this a shot. But all I know is that God has you here for a specific purpose, and it's going to move and steer you to hopefully live a life that's different so you can get to this new place that's on the other side, the place that God has for you where you're energetic, abundant in health, and able to truly step into the person that God's created you to be. And that's what the Onyx Show is really all about. It's why we do what we do, so that you can ultimately have every experience to the fullest and live life to the fullest, which is exactly what we're promised. And so when I come to today as a really cool episode, and when we talk about the power of rest, learning to live like Jesus in a burnt out world, the reason that I pull Jesus into this is based off of one very specific story. Because if you've listened to my podcast over the last few weeks, I've talked a lot about of my experience going to New York City and the rhythm of exhaustion that I was kind of just walking through and getting out of rhythm, distorted rhythm, dysfunctional rhythms in my life that ultimately sometimes have to continually be checked and balanced. And being able to see what is on the other side allows you to cast new vision, allows you to see new truths in ways that the world doesn't illuminate them. And so we live in a world that celebrates exhaustion, and I think everybody can experience that in their own way. But we see this burnout being worn like a badge of honor, and busyness is often mistaken for obedience and urgency for importance. But when we think about rest is treated like a weakness. It's felt to be lazy. It's something that you have to earn after you prove that you're good enough, or that you've accomplished something, or that you're valuable. But there's a very specific story in the Bible that, as I was in my devotional about 2 weeks ago in John, it just clicked for me. I've always known that it's not a sin to feel something, but when rest feels like sin, whatever is replacing rest has become an idol. That's a great way to look at it. If rest feels like sin, then performing has become an idol, whatever that might be. And ultimately, that's not the way that Jesus lived. And the scriptures definitely don't teach that. So today, what I want to dive into is, what does the power of rest actually look like? And when I'm talking about rest, I'm not talking about self-care. I'm not talking about rest as a luxury, but rather as a core part of your walk every single day. What does it look like in your rhythms? Because it's something that we have to learn to do if we want to make sure that we have capacity to walk the walk in which we've been called to go. And so when I come to this story, this scripture, this devotional that I went through, the clearest way I've ever been able to see this, and hopefully I can articulate the same experience that I had upon reading this, is in the life of Elijah. When we think about Elijah coming into John 4, Elijah had just come off one of the most intense spiritual victories in the Bible. There was fire from heaven that came down. There was false prophets exposed. God's power was made undeniable. And immediately after that, he collapses. He collapses in exhaustion. He's fatigued. He's tired. And there's this spirit called Jezebel, and this Jezebel spirit threatens him. So Elijah starts to run. And I'm going to bring this into like today's context, right? So in the season of my life that I was in, it was coming up to year end, and I had been on the road for 41 of 52 days. I had been birthing a new business in Holy Health with a team. We had grown our Onyx team to that of 37 people. We had increased revenues to 87% over the course of the year. I was on tour with Brandon Lake and coming back into a business that was continually having me on the road speaking 27 times over the course of that time that I was on the road. And so there was a lot of pouring out, and a lot of victories, a lot of amazing things. God has shown his face, shown his faithfulness, but I was tired. And suddenly this Jezebel spirit that's attacking Elijah was the same way that I felt, from this space of anxiety, this space of frustration, this space of lack of focus. And I felt like I couldn't get my footing. Felt like nothing could bring me joy. It was like everything felt like an ask. Every person that had said no to me or had to reschedule something, it was like it was something personal against me. And that's not usually how I react. That's not usually how I would walk. And I had to really just step back and reflect. And you may have had seasons like that. But the spirit that was impacting Elijah, and thus such as myself. And hopefully maybe you can give yourself some grace and be like, man, maybe this is why I'm feeling so down in the dumps. Maybe this is why I'm depressed. Maybe this is why I'm feeling this way. But I want you to listen to these words that Elijah spoke, because it's this level of depth. It was 1 Kings 19:4. And he says, "Is it enough now, O Lord? Just take my life." Like, he's so far at the end. He's so exhausted. He's so tired. He's come up against so much. And now he's faced with more obstacles and more things to overcome. It's just like a pile on. He's like, enough. Like, just take me. And what I want you to see is that this isn't weakness. This is exhaustion. And when we're exhausted, there's this change, this shift in our mind frame. And I know what it feels like to be emotionally done. I know what it feels like to be physically depleted. I know what it feels like to be spiritually empty. I know what it feels like to be mentally distorted. You just can't see clearly anymore. And maybe that's a place that we're meeting you today when you're listening to this podcast. Maybe we're meeting you right where Elijah was and right where I was. And this matters because many of us mistake moments like this as spiritual failure. We experience moments like this as I'm not good enough, and true reason to disqualify yourself as to why to quit, why to stop, why not to take another step forward, when they are actually biological and neurological overload. There's things that we've been doing over and over and over again, and we haven't stepped into this. But even more so than seeing yourself represented by Elijah and even my story is, I want you to pay attention to what God does in this moment. In this moment, God doesn't rebuke Elijah. He doesn't correct his theology. He doesn't demand his repentance. He doesn't give him a sermon. He doesn't talk down to him. Just like for me in that moment, my wife didn't say, hey, stop doing this. Hey, start doing this. Hey, go in this different direction. I didn't feel guilty as to how I was acting. But instead, for Elijah in that moment, God sent Elijah an angel. And the angel says one thing: take a nap, get up, eat and drink. And so from the nap, Elijah woke up, he got bread, he got water, and he went down and napped again. Went down a second time. And the angel comes back a second time and says, get up and eat, for the journey has been a lot for you. And I just think this is astonishing, because so often we think, oh, we just need another lecture. We need another pump-up sermon. We need another correction. Where instead, no. We just need to rest. We just need to replenish. We just need to rejuvenate. We just need a little something quality to eat and something good quality to drink and a little nap. Because before God addresses Elijah's thoughts, before he speaks direction, before he addresses correction, before he gives purpose or calling, he restores the body. God cares about what we're eating. He cares about what we're drinking. He cares about how we're fueling, because mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress are all integrated. He teaches us something that we often desperately need to hear, is that sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is rest. And I experienced this so deeply because I literally pulled myself aside and I said, I just need to isolate myself. I need to isolate myself from people. I need to isolate myself from doing. I need to isolate myself from everything. And I just need time for me. I just need time for what's happening internally with me. I just need a moment where I can relax and disconnect, because I can't continue to be pulled in all these directions. And when I did that, that was the point that God met me. That was the point that I started to just get these revelations and these new moments of understanding that were not just replenishing, but restoring. help me feel whole, energetic, and vibrant again. I think what is so cool is that God understands something that us as modern Christians often ignore, is that the soul is carried in a body. So when the body is depleted, emotions destabilize, our perspective gets narrowed, we don't see things for what they actually are, and we see it as like the ultimatum or as like something that's finite. When that happens, fear starts to get amplified within us, and despair starts to lie to us. It starts to sit within us, and as that lingers, it distorts the way that we see the entire world. And when Elijah, who had just had the greatest things happen to him, feared for his life and thought his life was over, God was like, no. Bro, you just need a rest. That's it. You just need a rest. It's the same thing he said to me. Justin, you just need to rest. Justin, just go and get to bed early. Justin, just go and take an afternoon nap on a Saturday. Justin, just go and sit down. In John 4, Jesus was on the move. Jesus was working. Jesus was walking. And he literally, it says in John 4, tired from the journey, Jesus sat down. It was around noon. He took an afternoon rest when he was on his way to deliver a message. And because he obeyed and sat down, that was the reason that all of a sudden he was able to have one of the biggest movements and one of the biggest revivals in an entire city that's known while he was walking this earth. But it started with obedience of resting rather than continuing to push through, because he hadn't arrived at where he was going yet. He was going from Judea to Galilee, and he stopped just outside of Samaria. And so you see these things, you see these levels of obedience, and it's the same thing that was happening here. Because a lot of us continue to think that we need a miracle when instead we just need a better rhythm. And it brings me to this thought of like rest and restoration is often needed before revelation. Like before I was able to get the revealing moment of like sitting here reading this, I needed to rest and restore myself, my heart, my mind, and my spirit. And after Elijah rests and eats, it's only then that God speaks. And here's the craziest part. What it says is Elijah, now that you're rested, get up, go out to the mountain in which God is going to be passing by. And so he goes out, he stands on the mountain. And all of a sudden, there's this massive wind that comes along. But it says God was not in the wind. Then all of a sudden, there's this massive earthquake that splits the mountains. But it says God was not in the earthquake. And then it says there's this massive fire. But it says God was not in the fire. So as he watched all of these crazy environmental things happen, it then says, but then there was a gentle whisper, and God gave him the next direction. And so often in our lives, we are pulled towards the big thing that's happening. We're pulled towards the thing that is making noise, the thing that is casting this massive vision. And I asked myself, why would God give Elijah rest and then pull him into saying, hey, God's passing through, and give him 3 massive opportunities to hear God, but it was only in a gentle whisper after he waited for those 3, because he was teaching him a lesson. And so when we think about it, we have to come back to the order in which God operates. And there's 4: rest, nourishment, stillness, and then direction. God heals the body before he addresses the soul, because a soul on fire means nothing in a depleted body. And I think all of you can understand what it feels like to want to be on fire, to want to go and do something, but feel depleted in trying to execute. And yes, I believe in the supernatural, but I also believe in partnering with the one who made us. And so when we think about this, why does God heal the body before he addresses the soul? Because exhaustion makes it impossible to hear God accurately. And Elijah had just come off of a mountain where he saw God move in fire. He saw God move in earthquakes. He saw God move in heavy winds. He saw him move. So that's what he would have expected just because he was in this space of depletion. But no, he wants you to see through all of this. He wants you to eliminate the distractions, and he wants you to wait, pause, and be still to hear the whisper. But the whisper can only be heard if the body is restored and ready to receive. And so when you're tired, everything feels urgent, everything feels heavy, everything feels hopeless. But when your body is restored, you have capacity to listen. This is why Jesus so often withdrew. This is why he slept in the boat. This is why he left crowds. This is why he went to quiet places, because he didn't heal from exhaustion. He prevented it with rhythm. He didn't heal people when he was exhausted. He didn't heal people when he was depleted. He didn't heal people in a space of frustration. No. He prevented it with rhythm so that he was always prepared. This is why rhythm is so critical. This is why rhythm has to be treated as sacred. And so if you want to live like Jesus, this is not optional. If you say, like, you wear this bracelet, right? I have this bracelet, WWJD, what would Jesus do? We've seen them all over the place. You probably had them as a kid. Maybe you go to church on Sunday and it says, be more like Christ. Whatever it is that you're doing and you're listening to this podcast and you're working through this. But if we actually want to live like Jesus did, then we have to do what Jesus does. We can't just try to play this and just being like, I'm just going to love everybody. I'm just going to be kind to everybody. No. There's a certain order that needs to be happening because Jesus lived with rhythm. Jesus regularly withdrew. There was intentional rest. There was trust in the Father. There was time with the Father. There was quiet. There was stillness. But there was a deep desire to do the work as well. A rhythm between rest and restoration, work and service, stress and overreaching. There was a rhythm that occurred between all of those. He didn't rush. He didn't hurry. He was never frantic. He lived from abundance and not depletion, not because he was superhuman, but because he actually experienced the life of what it meant to be fully human, fully man, living in rhythm. Because here's the truth. You cannot live a Christ-like life on a chronically tired nervous system. It's why I believe that our nervous system is the ultimate factor in making sure that we are healthy or not. And if our nervous system is unregulated, then we will live a life that feels unregulated. We will live a life that doesn't allow us to actually create the breakthroughs that we're looking for, which is why we feel constantly sick, bloated, inflamed, brain fogged, inability to sleep, stressed, autoimmune disorders popping up this is why we live this way, because we live a disordered life. And you can't hear God clearly when your body is constantly trying to give you the alert system saying, I'm not living in accordance to how I was created and built. You can't love well when you're empty. There's things that need to happen first. And so when we think about rest, rest is not quitting. Rest is obedience. Rest is something that we have to step into. Rest, when used properly, is a weapon, but rest can also be wasted time if not used to prepare obediently. And so when we think about us today and how this starts to come back, the angel said something that speaks so much today. This journey has been a lot for you. I get goosebumps even as I say it. This journey has been a lot for you. Because I feel that this journey has been a lot for me. Yes, I've been birthing a new business. Yes, I've been asked to do so many things. I'm walking obediently in those things. It's been a long year, and it's only the beginning. And what a blessing, how grateful I am to do it. But the journey has been a lot for you, and maybe that's the same for you. Maybe you've been going through infertility. Maybe you've been going through job changes. Maybe you've been going through a business failure. Maybe you're having trouble in your relationship or your marriage or your kids or whatever it might be. The journey's been a lot for you, and he's not shaming you, but he has to be honest. And some of you are trying to carry callings on bodies that have never been restored, have never been renewed, have never been redeemed. And he's trying to ask you, hey, when you live in rhythm, when you learn how to rest well, that's when I can increase the capacity and increase the blessings upon you, because you've got the capacity to carry them. Some of you are trying to discern God's will while living in this state of constant depletion, and you can't hear God or discern God when you are in that state of depletion. And so what I'm inviting you into today is something that I have experienced wholeheartedly to the nth degree, which is rest, eat, drink, sleep, so you can serve. And when you repeat this over and over and over again, you do this not because you're weak, you do this because you are human, fully human as Jesus was, fully human as he experienced. God is not done with you, even though you feel like you're at wit's end, but he will not ask you to walk further until you are strengthened, until you have capacity, until you have the ability to carry what it is that he has prepared for you. The power of rest is not escaping. It's not numbing yourself. It's not scrolling on social media. It's not numbing through different shows on Netflix. It's not just having a sports game thrown on and allow yourself to drift into an abyss. No, it's disconnecting so you can ultimately reconnect with that who made you, to give you every ability to prepare what you're stepping into. Rest is preparation. It's preparation for what is waiting for you on the other side. And if you want to live like Jesus, You have to make sure you rest like him, intentionally, rhythmic, and purposeful. And the more that we can start to do this, the more you're going to be able to take on. You'll be able to serve more and better, which is what we're called to. Not from a state of depletion, but a space of abundance, because we've learned how to live life fully and abundantly. We know success is different, so own your different, and we'll see you guys next week.